Hello. Right, some of you may have noticed that the video I put up on toxicity, etc. yesterday, I've taken down. I tried to simplify a complex subject, and a few people commented it was incorrect, and they were right, it was incorrect. I was trying to put it in a real basic way so that pretty much anyone could follow it, but in doing that I oversimplified the problem and actually gave out advice that was potentially not very good. So what I was saying was that if you look at the anabolic to androgenic ratio of drugs, if you go for drugs with low androgenics, they'll be less toxic on the body. That isn't quite, well, it isn't true, it's incorrect. The reason androgenicity causes stress, it will cause central nervous system stress, so toxicity is probably the wrong word. And the other problem with looking at it that way is that it gives a bit of a false indication of how harmful drugs are, because one, orals, as we know, have a significant effect on cholesterol and obviously hepatotoxic stress, liver. So yeah, something like oxandrolone, Anavar, has quite a low androgenic value. And I'd mentioned DECA. Now DECA is less stressful than test on the body, especially on a central nervous system, and in fact DECA is an anti-inflammatory, but it is a lot higher potential of causing damage to heart cells. So the toxicity terminology was probably wrong, and I tried to oversimplify something that was complex, and in doing so potentially created a video that could lead to someone being an overuse of Anavar or something like that, because I wasn't very clear. So decided to approach it from another angle, and the principle's still the same, in the fact that you need to manage the stress that these drugs cause you, and if you have the opportunity to reduce your dose for a period of time, particularly if you're doing multiple peaks in competition, then do it, because it's the overall stress that these drugs put in your body that cause the problems. And when your central nervous system gets too stressed, or toxicity in your body gets too high, yeah, you're going to feel a bit shitty, but that will actually have quite a significant impact in restricting growth. So that message is still the same, that hasn't changed. When you're designing cycles, consider how stressful they are to the body, and the androgen ratio will give you an indication of how stressful a drug is to your system. But also, I think where the confusion or where the mix-ups are coming are, we're talking about how much a drug has an immediate effect on your systems, as opposed to the potential a drug has to cause you harm, and they are slightly different. So for example, DECA is quite mild, it's an anti-inflammatory, it's supportive of your immune system, etc, etc. So as a drug that causes stress on your system, it's quite mild, but it has something like 10-11 times the potential for heart cell damage over testosterone. So in that way, it's definitely got a higher risk factor, and this is the problem. There is really no simple solution, and I tried to simplify an overly complex situation and ended up giving advice that probably was a bit shit. If I'm honest, it was very shit. So I thought, rather than have a video out there that can be misleading, get rid of it and just redo it. So when you design cycles for yourself, you do need to consider the overall stress factor of the drugs you're taking. And the androgen ratio does give you an indication of how stressful drugs are on your system. It doesn't give the full picture, and certain drugs will have certain other problems embedded in them. Like nandrolones, for example, we're talking about DECA. Obviously it's more, but it has a great potential for damage to heart cells, about 11 times that of test. And as I've discussed on many times, it also has some quite significant impacts within the brain. You can offset that to some degree with DHT, but there's still an issue there. but its immediate stress factors on the body are a lot lower. Obviously orals are toxic to the liver in general, and in general they will affect HDL. I mean, all steroids increase LDL, but orals are particularly efficient at reducing HDL. So that's going to create a greater level of cardiac risk. So again, problems there, but the individual stress factor of something like you're going to feel a lot better on a dose of Anavar than you are on a dose of Halo. And that simple impact of those drugs in that way means that you can potentially run Anavar for a longer period without feeling like shit, and therefore compromising your performance, than you can something like Halo. So drugs like Halo want to be brought in at the last period of time, and they only want to be run for very short doses because they're going to have a bigger stress factor on the body. So look at your cycles in totality. If you are having to run over an extended period of time because you're doing multiple peaks, multiple competitions, then wherever you can, get that dose down low into some form of cruise. Even if it means you're running at, excuse me, I've got a right itchy nose, you're running at say 1.5 grams total drugs, even if you're just dropping down to 700, 800, any reduction for any period of time is going to lessen the overall stress on your body. And there's nothing, it's not going to have a major impact on your progress or your gains. You know, if you're coming off the back of a competition, be it bodybuilding, powerlifting, strongman, whatever it is, a couple of weeks afterwards, you're better looking at higher anabolics and lower androgens anyway, a lot less stressful on the central nervous system, give your body a chance to recuperate a little bit, recover from the show, and then drive into the next comp, which might be 3-4 weeks later. But wherever you can, get it down. That's going to help overall management of your drug throughout the cycle, and that's going to help your overall performance. That's probably a lot better way of putting this than how I'd initially done it, which was quite misleading. On the subject of nandrolones and brain stuff, I read some interesting stuff the other day about EPO, the popular drug with cycling, increases red blood cell count, having a neuroprotective quality against nandrolones. So I am still looking for some more evidence on that, but at the moment I'm not finding much. But if I do, I'll definitely do a short video on that for you guys. Other than that, we will leave it. Oh yes, the other point of the last video, which I haven't mentioned in this one, I need to repeat it because obviously the video is now gone, was the previous video before that. I had a comment on being busy, being knackered, shitloads of work, and 2 people have commented that that was becoming a repetitive trend in the videos I was putting out, and that it wasn't particularly interesting and seemed a bit pointless, and they had a valid point. So I ain't mention it anymore. Simple as. So we're not going to talk about how busy I am or how knackered I am or any of that bullshit, because like they said, who the fuck wants to know? And I take that on board, I generally do. Who the fuck does want to? I mean, half the time I don't understand why anyone would want to know what I'm fucking doing anyway, but I take that on board. On another note, I am currently doing my, I think it's called ETA, something to teach. It used to be called Petals in the UK. Oh, let me find out what it's called. Award in Education and Training. So it's EAT. I'm doing my level 3 in that at the moment. The military asked some years ago for us all to get us Petals level 3. I did the course, and then they decided I didn't fucking need it, which pissed me off a little bit. So my coursework never got submitted. They've now turned around and said you have to have it, but it doesn't exist anymore, and this is the equivalent. Luckily I found a training provider that will accept my old coursework, which is mean I hadn't had to do the course completely again, which is a fucking great one. But I just have to do my assessment and a peer review, I think it is. So I'm working through that. Hopefully get that sorted this week, and that'll be that out of the way. And yeah, the other thing I'm currently working on is trying to get my head around Prezi, which is a bit like PowerPoint, to do a presentation for schools on weed. on symptoms of usage and symptoms of, well, indications of sale. So we're working on that at the moment as well, because obviously, as I've mentioned before, we're trying to push into the schools a little bit, and the local high school is willing to work with me on developing programs and trialing them, and then developing them into a package that we can then push out into schools. So I need to get my head down and get on with that. Otherwise, that's it. So apologies for yesterday's video that quite rightly was pulled by people as being misleading and incorrect, because technically it was. Apologies for the previous, I'm doing a lot of apologising, previous video about moaning how busy I was, because who wants to hear that bollocks? And you're right, who does? And onwards and upwards to better things. So have a good one, and I'll catch up with you soon.